So we finished Season 5 of Buffy, a season that a lot of people were telling us is where the show gets good. But they say that about pretty much every season.
And this was potentially going to be the last season of the show.
Yeah, and I was watching it with that in mind, to try to get a sense of how that would have felt.
Let's back up, though. We started this season with a comedic episode where Buffy fought Dracula, which was unexpected since the end of Season 4 had that David Lynch-type episode with the first Slayer. So this season was already off to a rocky start.
Yeah, coming from that episode, Restless, it seemed like they had a lot of stuff in mind for what they were going to do in Season 5, and it seemed like they knew what they were doing. And that episode was so good that I was really surprised and disappointed when Season 5 didn't really feel like they had it really planned out very well. And that start with Dracula is a good example, I guess, where it kind of just felt like a random thing that they threw in.
Yeah.
And I guess if they're going to do something like that, it's good to do it as the first episode before you bring in the main storyline.
Which is pretty much what they did, because the next episode was all about Dawn.
And I really like the idea of bringing in a new character and just expecting the audience to go along with it. That was a very risky move, I think, from their perspective. And even though I feel like Dawn didn't really turn out to be that interesting of an actual character, I like that they did that.
And I liked how Real Me, while a little bit cheesy, provided a very good introduction of who Dawn was and how she interacted with everyone else.
I agree, while still bringing in harmony also, and treating it in the world of the show as basically just kind of another episode. And we know that she was originally written to be a younger character than the actress turned out to be that they got, but I don't think she would have been all that interesting. I don't think that would have really changed a whole lot. I wish there had been more to her as a person.
Well, she wasn't even real.
Yeah, technically. But a lot of her episodes were just her complaining about that, of like, oh, I'm not a real girl and whatever. And I get bringing that up, but having her act so stupidly does not make her a likable character. They could have handled that much better.
And it does open up some potential for her now in seasons after Glory is gone, because that was her purpose for existing. But now that Glory is defeated, Dawn could have some good character growth episodes in figuring out what her purpose is now.
That's true. And I wonder if, and I hope this isn't the case, but I wonder if that alignment or whatever that Glory was waiting for, if that can come around again and somebody else can try to use Dawn to do the same thing again. I hope that doesn't happen, because that would be really dumb.
Lame, yeah. Let's shift over to Giles. He didn't really have anything to do this season, except show up at the end and kill Ben. His decreasing usefulness as the show goes on is disappointing. He opened the magic shop, but that didn't do anything for him as a character. The development was more on the space itself. If anything, Anya got more development out of that than Giles.
Yeah, I agree. That was all very disappointing. It felt like there was a lot of potential there, especially with maybe comedic stuff between Giles and Anya working at the shop together.
And it started that way.
Yeah, I wish there had been more of that. I feel like that would have made the entire show a lot better. But instead, we just got a bunch of scenes of the characters sitting at that table, and it basically just became the new hangout spot.
The fact that he did kill Ben could create a new character arc for him. I think it would be good if he became the rogue member of the gang who did things because they needed to be done.
Which would kind of make more sense for his character, because he's obviously the only one that takes things seriously a lot of the time. But even, again, in this season, it felt like that wasn't the case a lot of the time, when he was just kind of acting like it was any other episode. And sometimes Buffy this time would be the one to say, hey, we can't just joke around. Which, I mean, I'm glad at least she was doing that, but I wish all the characters were like that.
Yeah. Anya's arc of embracing commerce was good, and it gave her something to do, especially with her personality. It's hard to have her character mesh meaningfully with anyone else other than Xander. And having her mesh with a concept instead of a person actually worked pretty well. And her and Xander's relationship has been built up I want to say better than any relationships Buffy has had lately.
I completely agree. And I think it helps that she is mostly handled as a comedic character. When they do have those more serious relationship type moments, even if a lot of times they're just kind of stuck in a place where they don't really fit, I do think they work a lot better because of the character that she is. You know, most of Buffy's stuff is just whining and complaining and misinterpreting things, and it all just feels very contrived. But Anya feels like she's actually being written more appropriately for her character.
And one episode where her personality actually worked to the main plot's benefit was in The Body, when she was trying to come to terms with what Joyce being dead actually meant.
Her as a character still doesn't really make sense in terms of her background and the way she seems to be completely out of touch with reality. But if that's the character they're going to go with, I do think that they made that work a lot better for her than anybody else.
Yeah, I agree. Riley was still around, which I totally forgot about until I was sifting through notes from past episodes.
I did too, yeah.
His departure meant nothing because his existence meant nothing. They don't even talk about him anymore.
Which is good, I
Right.
guess.
It's still Angel this and Angel that. They put in episodes focusing on Riley's heart condition, then how he needed to feel wanted by letting himself get bitten by vampires, but it didn't matter because he did not matter. And him still referencing the initiative was so dumb. If that group ever shows up again, it will be completely pointless.
I agree. It felt like every one of those things that you mentioned about him was the writers desperately trying to come up with some way to make him interesting or to have him, have something to do besides just kind of being there and being Buffy's generic boyfriend.
I was going to say sex doll.
But none of it worked. He was not interesting in any kind of way, and I'm glad he's gone. It's just too bad that they didn't kill him off.
Tara got some more growth this season. We had that episode with her family and how it related to Willow, and then her being CGI'd by Glory was actually surprising. But like I said in the finale discussion, I was very disappointed that her condition was immediately reversed. It was a huge missed opportunity for more development between her and Willow.
Yeah, and I didn't like what they were doing in the second half of the season as much, where it was kind of dumb arguments between the two of them that didn't really make sense. But I agree that everything before that was pretty good on her character.
Yeah, it was like the writers couldn't come to terms with two people having a positive, healthy relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to be the thinking, is that it's not interesting unless they have some kind of dumb reason for arguing. But the writers can't come up with an organic way to make that work. And, I mean, you have enough characters in the show. Why not just have them get along? I mean, even Xander and Anya, for the most part, get along. And I think that works at this point. Just leave it alone. You have enough other things for the characters to deal with.
And if you want to pull conflict out of it, then have two characters that aren't getting along look at Willow and Tara and say, man, you guys have such a positive relationship. I wish I had that. Instead of saying, oh, good, we're all struggling together, even though there's no reason for that.
Yeah.
Spike falling in love with Buffy was painful right from the beginning. It felt like a very fan service thing because the writers were forced because Spike was popular.
I agree. I mean, we've seen from whatever that interview was that I talked about with James Marsters that the writers had no idea how to handle his character. And that's exactly what it feels like, even to the point of going back and forth from episode to episode in having Spike trying to kill Buffy or wanting to kill Buffy or whatever, and then being like, oh, I have to prove myself to her or whatever. They needed to pick a direction to go with him and just stick to that, at least. That would have been better than going back and forth. But the direction that they ended up going in with the relationship thing, or the wanting a relationship thing, yeah, it felt like it didn't make any sense, and it came out of nowhere, and it was really irritating, and it really made Spike seem like a really stupid character for a long time. I think it's gotten better toward the end of the season, but only because I guess that's what they're doing now, so they kind of seem to have a better grasp on it. But for a long time, that was very painful.
It was a little bit better when Harmony was still around, because she could provide a little bit of a reprieve, but then she left too.
Yeah, I mean, I do like when Spike is treated as a comedic character, but it still doesn't make sense for his character. And I think part of it is just that he's a good actor and he knows how to handle that kind of material, but I don't think it's a good way to treat the character. And it's, obviously not consistent with what he used to be.
And as time went on, it turned from comedic to pathetic.
Yeah, and trying way too hard, I think, to be funny or to be, I don't know, I don't want to say touching, but, to make him a sympathetic character.
The only good thing we got out of him really was that episode about his backstory, even though we didn't learn anything new. But at least it was something refreshing.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't think of anything he really did in this season other than fawn over Buffy.
Yeah, because again, the writers would just kind of stick him in wherever they could.
Yeah.
And it was not interesting.
Joyce's illness and eventual death was unexpected. But the show kept wildly shifting between this is super important and, yeah, that doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when they were focusing on it, I thought it really worked. And I think it was because they were dealing with a real-world problem, so the writers could approach it in a real-world way instead of just making up random stuff.
It felt like there was an internal fight in the writing room between people who wanted to focus on it and people who said, this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We can't have real-world problems. That's boring.
I mean, to me, it just felt like they didn't know how to properly balance all the different subplots that were going on. So when that one took the forefront, I thought it was good, but...
Even though when she died and everyone was so distraught, that wasn't believable, because outside of Buffy and Dawn, no one else really cared that much about Joyce. Maybe Giles for a little bit.
Yeah, for a long time we didn't even see Joyce. Like in season 3, she was barely around at all, and they even made a point of that, of Buffy having not visited or whatever. I think it definitely would have had a lot more impact when she died, or even when she started getting sick, if we had had more of her, having a bigger part in Buffy's life.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Willow. Willow's development of her magic has really been a focus of this season, but her as a character, I feel like, has really taken a step back from what she used to be.
Yeah, I think there was that one episode where it was Buffy's birthday, and Buffy and Willow, their mindsets were completely reversed from where we started.
Yeah, Willow used to be the intelligent character. She used to be the one that was keeping things together and kind of pointing people in the right direction, I feel like.
She would think through the consequences of what actions they wanted to take.
And I mean, when the show started, her character was the smart one, or I guess it was kind of the nerdy one, but, smart. And she does not feel like that anymore. She just feels like some generic girl that knows how to use magic, but doesn't make intelligent decisions ever. And that even shows with the dumb arguments that she has with Tara. At this point, Tara feels like a more mature and intelligent character than Willow, for sure.
I think one of the biggest varying plot devices in this season was magic in general. Magic can do or can't do whatever based on the episode we're in. It was not consistent. It just served as a get-out-of-jail-free card for whatever the writers couldn't figure out.
Yeah, if you're going to have magic be a big part of the show, you need to know how it works. Even if the audience doesn't necessarily know, it needs to feel consistent in the world of the show.
And just outright saying, can we use magic to do that? And a character saying no, and then moving on, and not following up why not, really makes it feel lazy.
Yeah, it makes the characters look stupider when they can't figure out things that from the audience perspective, it seems like they should be able to from the magic perspective. Especially if Willow and Tara are spending so much time learning about that and focusing on that. And you would think Giles would too, if he's a watcher and all about this.
Which he did earlier.
Yeah, at times, but again, just kind of whenever the writers felt like, oh, I guess we need to do something. Yeah, it definitely felt like just a crutch in the writing of how to get out of certain situations or how to extend certain scenes, and that's very disappointing.
Yeah, so Willow, going downhill.
And I had a question about their cat.
Yes.
Where did the cat go? I mean, they haven't been in Willow's dorm room or whatever in forever, and even when they were, we didn't see the cat anymore after a while.
And I was very pleased when they introduced the cat as part of the continuity, because they had talked about it, and I was like, good, they're going to follow through with that. But then the cat disappeared.
Yeah, I can only assume that it ran away because its owners were so stupid and didn't know how to take care of a cat.
Can we use magic to feed the cat? No. And then the cat just left.
It was a dorm, right, that they were living in, not a house or something. So I find it unlikely that they would be allowed to keep a cat in the first place, but I don't know. And then that made me also think about Amy.
You're taking... Okay, no. We have to hold on to Amy until like the very end of the discussion.
Okay.
because that's my last thing,
There's not a whole lot to say about Xander.
as usual.
At least, I guess, I can't believe I'm going to say this as a good thing because I really don't like him, but he feels like by far the most consistent character in the show.
But maybe that's because he has such little time dedicated to him, so it's easy to do that.
Yeah, he doesn't really have anything to do.
Even when there's two of him.
And even in the past, whenever they've had an episode focusing on him, it's usually about how he doesn't really fit in with this group, how he doesn't play an important part in the overall...
The group dynamic.
Yeah. So yeah, he definitely feels like he's there just because he's been there from the start, but he doesn't really have anything to do. I mean, at least, again, like we've said, the Xander-Anya relationship works better than other relationships in the show, but he as a character is just not interesting at all and doesn't really do anything. Even in the last episode that came up again, where Spike called him a glorified bricklayer or something like that, and then he swings the wrecking ball at Glory and he's like, hey, look, I did something. But then he just gets out of the crane and just says, hey, what are we doing? And then doesn't do anything else.
There was that weird mini arc he had where he was obsessed with Riley. Do you remember that?
Yeah, in that one episode where Riley left, having Xander be the one to come to Buffy and say, hey, maybe you should think about this a little more. It was really goofy and didn't fit with him as a character.
And then in the next episode, when he and Anya were in bed together, he kept talking about Riley.
Yeah, he was like, oh, I enjoyed this so much more when Riley was around. I was like, come on. So yeah, I still don't like Xander. He's still annoying. His jokes are usually really painful. I'm not a huge fan of the actor. I don't like the performance of the character. I don't like the way the character is written. The character has nothing to do. If anybody should be killed off, it is Xander.
When the whole tone of the show was more lighthearted and comedic, he was still annoying, but at least he fit a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, when it was starting out and they're all just in high school, it kind of made sense. Like, they're all just friends or whatever. But now it feels like everybody has more of a purpose except for Xander.
Yeah. He can build retaining walls for them, both literal and emotional. And then Buffy, the main character of the show, who is now dead.
I suppose she has also been consistent in that she kind of randomly jumps between things that she's focusing on in random episodes. She'll go from, oh, we need to focus on this because it's important, to, oh, my whatever, I'm having this dumb little problem or dumb relationship stuff that I caused or that doesn't even actually exist as a problem, but I'm going to say it does.
And I think after Riley left, things got a little bit better in terms of that.
Yeah, definitely. And that was also around the time that she started getting more focused. But I think the problem at that point was more kind of the overall writing of not really figuring out how to handle the Glory problem.
Yeah. A positive change, though. I was happy at how she was more consistent in taking serious things seriously.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of having her go into that catatonic state for an entire episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was really lame. And it really just felt like a way to kind of drag things out.
Especially her quote-unquote revelation during that episode, which was not new.
Yeah. And I think really even the way she handled Joyce, I did like. It made her more sympathetic, but in a way that actually made sense. Like, she had personal emotional struggles that she was dealing with that made sense.
Yeah, they were way more relatable because it stemmed from something realistic.
Yeah, as opposed to her making up problems.
And then saying everyone needs to sympathize with her.
And of course, throwing off her duties to focus on that instead. I'm glad that they haven't pushed her into a new relationship after Riley left. Because they kind of seemed like they were going to try to do that with Ben, but then they immediately had Buffy say, I'm not going to do this. And that was good.
Yeah, I look forward to her coming back in season 6 with the boyfriend she met inside the portal. Maybe she'll hook up with that dragon.
Well, see, that could be cool.
Glory was introduced in episode 5, I think, but it took her forever to actually do something, despite her existing for a single purpose. There was no exploration needed, there was no soul-searching like with Adam, or complexities to sort out. She just needed to locate a single object, and then take that object. Yet it took her an entire season to get off her ass and do something.
Yeah, it seemed like the focus for her as a character was just on how powerful she was. But like you're saying, that doesn't add complexity to her at all. It simplifies her.
There were entire stretches of episodes where they didn't even mention her.
And even episodes when they did, but she didn't actually do anything, even though there was no reason for her not to do something. And that was so frustrating because that happened so many times.
And the fact that she was so lazy meant that the gang could have super prepared for her, but instead they also chose to do nothing except lose the weapon that actually worked against her.
That felt so much like Adam, the way Adam was handled in season 4, where they would keep talking about him but not actually do anything, and in the way that they couldn't figure out a way to beat him because he was so powerful or whatever. Even though, just like, again, with Glory and with Adam, they should have tried using a gun, and Anya even said that at some point, but they didn't do it.
And even when Glory decided to take action, I think of Checkpoint, she showed up to threaten Buffy, but then left, saying, "Next time I'll do something, even though I'm right here, right now, and there's nothing to stop me."
Yeah, there were multiple times where they had what I thought were good moments like that, because when that happened, that was interesting. It's just that they didn't follow through on it. And I think also of whatever episode it was where Glory busts in through the wall at the end, and it's like, oh, she's finally doing something. She's actually confronting them directly, but then she doesn't do that anymore after that. Well, I guess she got Dawn at that point, but still, she should have killed everybody. And like the moment when she CGI'd Tara, that was a big surprise kind of shock moment, and they didn't follow through on that. She didn't do that to anybody else. She even left when Willow started, running at them or whatever. Why didn't she do that to Willow immediately?
And they were in some festival or something. There's nothing stopping her from just killing all those people. No one can stop her. That was the entire threat of her character throughout the season. No one can stop her.
Yeah, they needed to figure out how to make that work from a story perspective, and they didn't.
Her and Ben being the same person was unexpected, but in the end, he didn't have a lot of character development, and his goals ended up being the same as hers.
Yeah, in a really kind of thrown together way at the last second, where he's just like, oh, I guess I'm going to go along with it because I want my life back or whatever. That was his entire character, was just, oh, my life was taken away by Glory.
Yeah, if I go away, who's going to make all those quirky one-liners?
Yeah, just the way his character was written just felt like another dumb, annoying Buffy love interest type character.
And people point to the magic that makes people forget Ben and Glory are one and the same as really clever. But to me, it was a complete write-off to the writers not being able to figure out that plot point. And later, when they need everyone to remember, they just say, oh, well, I guess that magic isn't happening anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if they had that idea from the start, I think it would have worked a lot better if they had kind of established that earlier. I think there's a lot of things like that, a lot of things relating to Glory and Ben, that if they had been established earlier, the writers could have kind of played with those ideas more instead of having them just kind of come up and then just kind of brush them off.
But I think they came up because the writers didn't have those ideas early on.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah, I think we're giving them too much credit.
Yeah. What did you think of Glory as a person, like her personality?
I liked her being unhinged and slowly going insane until she could suck out someone's brain. But again, that did not prevent her from taking action. You can be ditzy, but still do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, her entire approach to things didn't make sense.
It would have been different if she said, oh, it'll happen eventually, I don't really care. But her minions kept reminding her, and she kept saying, the clock is ticking, we have to do this.
Yeah, and then she would send a giant snake out instead of doing something herself.
Yeah.
Even though there's no reason for her not to do something herself.
Her ride on that big snake, that would have been awesome.
Well, that would have been something. But yeah, I liked her personality. I felt like I think I said this maybe when she was first introduced, but it felt like they were kind of trying to go for like a warped version of Buffy and her personality and, being another blonde girl and whatever.
And we've had enough antagonists who were very serious about everything, so it was a nice change.
Yeah, I do like that all the main threats that they've faced in each season do still feel unique from each other. I would say she's probably the most similar to the mayor with the way he was kind of jokey and, I don't know, quirky, I guess.
Yeah.
Not the kind of personality you would expect for the main villain. But when it came to Glory, when they would start fighting and stuff, she would basically just turn into like, oh, I'm going to kill you and whatever. But then she wouldn't actually do anything.
I would say there were a lot of episodes in the season that were very forgettable, especially as the season went on.
Yeah, because so many of them just felt like the same thing that we've already seen, just kind of dragged out, with Glory maybe doing one little thing and then not really much else.
The only thing that stood out to me during those episodes when it was addressed was Buffy's increased panic over Joyce, her being more responsible when Joyce wasn't there, that kind of stuff.
I did appreciate that, but the problem with those episodes was the overall plot still felt like the same thing.
This whole season was full of fumbled ideas and lack of follow-through. Even when something compelling was introduced, it was quickly discarded or outright forgotten.
Right, and I think a good example of that is the Knights of Byzantium, who were introduced pretty late into the season, seemed to be a big deal, and then got one episode devoted to them where their part in the overall story ended up not mattering at all.
Yeah, they didn't show up at all, and then in battle because they were already dead.
They kept saying that if they get killed off, more of them will show up or whatever, but I guess they're all walking on foot, so it's going to take them forever. I mean, the entire concept just didn't work.
That would be really funny in season 7 if they show up to town.
Where's Glory? It felt like they threw them in there just because they needed something else to kind of drag the season along, you know, to delay things before they actually dealt with Glory. But they felt so underdeveloped and so nonsensical with their medieval style attire and approach to everything, and even the way they talked and everything. It's like, where have they been hanging out this whole time? What have they been doing?
Yeah, I think about that part where they assembled in the park with an entire garrison of horses and catapults and all that shit.
Yeah, I mean, they almost seem conceptually like the Watchers Council, where they're there to fight evil or whatever, but then they just kept fighting Buffy, and I mean, again, I think it would have worked a lot better if they had teamed up and then stormed Glory's tower at the end, and they could have had, you know, the knights fighting the minions or something, but instead they were just out of the picture altogether by that point.
Speaking of the Watchers Council, they also showed up once to provide strife for Buffy, but then were gone after they told Buffy Glory is a god.
Yeah, we have such important information, you're going to need to hear it. And then they don't do anything, they don't really say anything, and that's it. What are they doing? That's what I really want to know, is they're just hanging out on their own over in Europe or whatever. What are they doing? Are they, I mean, I assume they're not dealing with Faith either, so the fact that they're supposed to be watching over the Slayers doesn't seem to matter at all.
I guess they're just watching, but not doing.
So frustrating.
What was your least favorite episode this season?
My least favorite episode was Into the Woods. That was the final episode with Riley, which was all about Buffy and Riley. And, of course, that's not interesting. Riley is just so lame and irritating and annoying, and his character in that episode was really dumb, and so was Buffy. That episode focused on all the elements of the show that I hate the most. And thankfully it ended with Riley leaving, but I still really hated it. What was your least favorite episode?
Listening to Fear, the one with the demon aliens summoned via meteor that vomit slime on insane people until they die. And to make matters worse, that was the one where Riley called in the initiative to deal with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
I hated that episode. It felt so out of place and nonsensical with a plot that was written by a 4th grader. It was awful.
I agree, and I'm not sure what grade I gave it, but looking back on it, I'm sure it was probably too high. Because I feel like most of this season, you gave a lot of episodes kind of B and D level, but I mostly stuck to C. I felt like so many episodes blended together this season, especially once you started focusing on Glory.
Yeah. So what was your favorite episode this season?
I'm going to go with Forever, which I think you gave a D+ or something?
Which one was that?
That was the one where Dawn tried to bring Joyce back after she died.
Okay.
I really liked the focus on the emotional fallout from Joyce's death. I liked the way it kind of closed things off at the end and, you know, brought Buffy and Dawn to terms with everything. And that was where Buffy also started dealing with the weight of the responsibility of everything now that Joyce was gone. And I even liked, even though, again, it was ripped straight off of the monkey's paw, I liked the whole thing of Joyce was coming back, but she might not be right, and Dawn erasing her at the end and all that. I thought it worked. And I will give honorable mention to The Body. I did think that was a good episode, too. And it was definitely shot better. and more interestingly put together. But I think the kind of dumb side joke stuff with especially Xander in that episode really hurt it for me. I thought Forever was a slightly more satisfying way of dealing with Joyce's death. But I thought they were both good. What was your favorite episode of the season?
The Body. I agree, it was really well shot. It had good acting. It toned down the melodrama. And just seemed like everybody in front and behind the camera was on their A game at the same time. I thought even for characters that normally don't really fit into situations like Anya really worked in this episode. And I think I pointed it out back then, but the lack of music also really worked in this episode for me.
I agree.
So who was your least favorite antagonist from this season? And you can't take mine.
I mean, I wonder if it's going to be yours. And I know that people are going to say that this doesn't count, but I'm going to say Spike.
Okay.
I think you picked Spike last season. I'm going to pick Spike this season because his entire role in the show does not make any sense, doesn't fit, doesn't work, doesn't add anything. He's just kind of there.
Don't you want to see him and Buffy get together, though?
I mean, at this point, I honestly don't care. Again, James Marsters is a good actor, and he handles the comedic stuff well. So I can appreciate it when they treat Spike comedically, even if I still think undermines his character. But this season has been entirely turning him around with the whole Buffy romance thing. And it doesn't make any sense and is just not interesting at all. And if anybody says that doesn't count, I'll throw in Glory's Minions as my second least favorite. They were treated comedically sometimes, and that was fine. But most of the time they were just kind of there as somebody for Glory to talk to. And from her perspective, using them as minions instead of a whole army of giant snakes or whatever, something else, more powerful demons, it didn't make any sense because they're so weak and so easily defeated by just normal people. So that was really disappointing. So what was your least favorite antagonist?
The Knights of Byzantium. They got this huge build-up. They existed with a very singular goal, but then they didn't really do anything. Then they all got killed at once, and then they didn't show up for the finale. It's a great arc.
You know what? I didn't even think about considering them as antagonists, but I would put them up there above, in terms of how much I hated them, above Glory's Minions. As in, I hated them more. Especially because when they first started showing up, they reminded me so much of the Initiative. The type of acting that we got. And the dumb, simplistic characters.
The medieval Initiative. So, who was your favorite antagonist this season?
The giant snake monster when it was practical.
Okay.
Because it looked cool. It was a surprisingly well-crafted thing, costume or whatever, even with the eyes moving and everything. It looked cool. But then too often they would cut to those dumb CGI shots. And I would give honorable mention to that weird three-headed dragon monster thing, even though it barely showed up. And even though it was shot really poorly with the camera just kind of swinging around randomly, like a Christopher Nolan fight scene.
Where was that?
It was the episode where they had to get the egg for something. I don't even remember why. It was a monster that didn't fit in with the show, but that's part of what made it cool to me, I guess, that it was different. It wasn't just another person with, taking the Star Trek approach of just a guy with some stuff glued on his face. So I think it could have been a cool monster if they had shot it differently and handled it more interestingly. Both of those monsters, I'm just kind of surprised that they went through the trouble of building them, especially the dragon-looking one, because that one only showed up for one scene. So hopefully they'll show up again, but I mean, I guess the giant snake wouldn't.
It could. We've had at least 4 giant snakes so far in the show.
Yeah, that's true. So what was your favorite antagonist?
Joyce's cancer. I'm being serious. I don't think any of the sentient threats did a good job, and there's no reason why the good guys should have struggled at all to overcome these very easy obstacles. Joyce's illness provided more struggle and plot developments than any of the monsters or demons this season.
Yeah, that's true.
And was an actual threat, not just to Joyce, but to Buffy and Dawn and their character development.
Okay, that's interesting, and I think that's valid.
Oh, I'm glad that I've met with your approval.
And we never ask people in the comments to give their choices for best episode, worst episode, Best antagonist, worst antagonist.
Even though some people very forcefully tell us.
Yeah, they talk about the episode sometimes, but I would like to see what people would say about their choices for those.
Yeah.
And why they disagree with us, because I'm sure they do.
It's okay to be wrong.
So what do you want to see more of, and what do you want to see less of in the next season?
I want to see less of, and I feel bad saying this, but I want to see less of Spike. Pretty much because of everything you pointed out before, of why he was your least favorite antagonist. I want to see more of multiple characters taking threats seriously at the same time and actually thinking through their actions and the consequences of those actions, and then actually taking action instead of sitting around for 12 episodes. What about you?
I should have put more thought into it, because I'm thinking about what you're saying about Spike now. I would like to see less. This is kind of going to go with what you were saying about wanting to see more of, but I just want to see less of the characters acting so stupid so much of the time, and not behaving in a way that is appropriate for the situation. Throwing in dumb jokes everywhere, shifting the focus to something that doesn't matter or shouldn't matter at that moment. That's what I want to see less of. I do also want to see less of the Spike Buffy thing, but I don't know. I if that's the direction they're going to go in, I do feel like it was better by the end of the season, but at the same time, it mostly feels like Spike is just there. What I want to see more of is something that I feel like they haven't done in the show, which is have an antagonist, the main antagonist, that is able to consistently come into conflict with the main characters in a way that makes sense and doesn't feel like the same thing over and over again.
And basically force them to take it seriously.
Right, but only for that moment. Most of these antagonists, I think maybe all of them, have been the kind of thing where things lead up to the end of the season where they have some kind of goal that they're trying to achieve. Like the Master freeing himself or whatever. Angel, I can't remember what he was doing, but opening some portal that was going to end the world. That's the same thing Gloria just did. Adam was trying to build up his army of demons or whatever he was doing. And the mayor, I can't remember what he was trying to get his hands on something, I think. It's not a bad idea to have things lead up to kind of a big moment where that's where you have to step in really and do something. But the problem is along the way, you need a plausible reason for the villain to still be around and for the heroes to still be around and for them not to have just directly gone after each other and constantly been trying to defeat each other. Because we haven't seen that. It doesn't make any sense for the characters to go deal with other things. It doesn't make sense for Glory to say, oh, I have to figure out who the key is, but then not do anything, not start killing Buffy's friends or whatever. We just need something that makes more sense in terms of the way the season is structured.
It's asking a lot.
Ah, I know.
So we're done with season 5. How many are left? 2?
2.
Okay.
Again, not counting the comic book seasons. And a lot of people said that, I mean, obviously different people have different preferences, but a lot of people said that the show gets better starting on season 5, but I didn't feel like that was really the case.
Agree.
Too much of it was just the same thing over and over again.
You have those little snippets of good ideas, but like I said, they're fumbled or just dropped before they have time to flourish.
Even season 4 had some really good standalone episodes, and I feel like this season only really had a couple.
Yeah, and I don't really think it's fair when you say, well, season 5 is the one that had, insert, good plot development, but that little plot development only happened over the span of 10 minutes out of the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people just like Glory as an antagonist. I don't know.
Maybe they could relate because they just are also really lazy and don't really take action until a long time. Let us know in the comments in the next year once you get around to it.
I'm hoping that things get better going forward. Season 6 came out at the same time as Firefly, and we are both fans of Firefly.
Does that mean that less effort was given to this show then?
I mean, that's possible. What I'm hoping is the writing in Firefly is just so much better. The characters are so much better realized. I'm hoping that whatever they did that made that show work, that they also start applying it to Buffy.
Yeah, but my fear is that because Buffy's been around so long and has an audience, they just put it on autopilot and treat Firefly with much more focus because it's fresh.
Yeah. The other thing that gives me at least a little bit of hope is the fact that from this point, Buffy shifted from the WB to UPN. I think it was UPN. Being that it's a different network, maybe the network will step in and say, hey, you need to make certain things work a little better. Unfortunately, I feel like since they were willing to pick up this show that had already been going for 5 seasons on another network, that they're probably going to say, just keep doing what you were doing.
Yeah, that's why we decided to put it here, because whatever you're doing is working for us.
Yeah, so I guess we'll find out.
Wow, what a positive send-off. We'll begrudgingly continue with this show.
Hey, that's as positive as I can get at this point. 5 seasons in, and this is where we are.
Thanks for watching.
Oh, did you want to throw in something about Amy?
Oh, and we forgot about the burning question that comes up every season. Where is Amy? Maybe they're just doing this huge series-long arc where she's going to come back and be the pivotal character to change everything.
Plotting her revenge because she's been mistreated this whole time.
And think about how much time she's had to come up with as many cheese and rodent puns.
Oh, man.
Oh, it would be so good.
Hopefully that's not what we have to look forward to. Although, honestly, that sounds better than what we've gotten in the show so far, so...
I mean, her arc has just been gnawing away at me.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, now we can stop.